At my younger brother's funeral, I expected shared tears, maybe even a few warm embraces, but all I found were cold faces and eyes that refused to meet mine. As I stepped toward his casket, holding back my sorrow, my niece pulled me aside. "He cut you out of the will," she whispered. "Said you walked away from the family. Said you didn't deserve anything. Maybe you felt that pain too. Not the loss of a life, but the quiet erasure of your place in someone's heart. Like everything you once gave had simply been forgotten. It felt like I was burying him twice, once for his body, and once for the bond we once shared. I was ready to leave in silence, carrying only grief. But sometimes, life leaves one, final note before the goodbye. And in that moment, between sorrow and stillness, something found its way to me. And what followed brought back more than I thought I had lost. I thought grief would bring people together. That maybe, in mourning, old wounds might soften. But as I stepped through the church doors, every head turned, only to quickly look away. No one smiled, no one reached out. The chill in the air wasn't just from the February wind slipping through the open doors. It came from them. My family. The pews were filled with faces I knew too well. My sister-in-law with her sharp jaw clenched tight. My cousins whispering into each other's ears. Even Aunt Ruth wouldn't meet my eyes. And the worst part, no one had saved me a seat. It was as if I had walked into a stranger's funeral, not my own brother's. I stood in the back, alone, pretending it didn't sting. Pretending I had come late by choice. But inside something cracked, quietly. I had crossed miles for this moment, for closure, for a goodbye that felt human. Instead, I got cold shoulders and closed hearts. The organ started playing, slow, solemn, the kind of song that makes your chest tighten. And as the casket rolled in, covered in lilies and soft blue cloth, I fought the urge to cry. Not for my brother, not yet, but for the version of family I once believed in. And just when I thought I couldn't feel smaller, my niece walked toward me with something that would change everything. As I stepped cautiously toward the casket, trying to hold myself together, my niece appeared at my side like a shadow. Her grip on my arm was soft, but urgent. Her eyes scanning the room before she whispered, "He cut you out of the will." My breath caught. "He said you walked away from the family, that you didn't deserve anything." It felt like the wind had been knocked from my chest. I wanted to ask her if it was true, but the look on her face told me everything. My heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the hymns echoing through the church. I stared at the casket, at the polished wood reflecting the pale light above us, and suddenly, I didn't recognize the man inside. Not the brother I once knew. Not the boy who used to protect me from bullies, who'd sneak me cookies when Mom wasn't looking. That boy was gone. And in his place, a stranger who'd signed my name out of his story. I turned away slightly, blinking hard to keep the tears from falling. The betrayal was sharp, but it wasn't just about money. It was about memory, about worth, about feeling like all the love, all the loyalty I'd once given him had vanished without a trace. It was being erased, not from a legal document, but from a life that I thought we'd built together. The people around me went on singing, oblivious or uninterested in what I'd just heard. I stood in the middle of them, but felt completely outside, a ghost at my own brother's farewell. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew I'd only confirm their silent judgment, that I didn't belong, that I was the outcast they believed I had chosen to be. And still, a part of me refused to believe it was his true final word. My brother wasn't perfect, but he had a heart Or at least, he used to. That flicker of doubt, that stubborn hope, was the only thing keeping me upright in that moment. Because deep down, I needed to believe he had one more truth to tell me. Long before the silence, before the will, before the distance grew into a canyon between us, there was laughter. Pure, ridiculous laughter that echoed down the hallways of our childhood home. My little brother, always tagging along, his feet too fast for his tiny frame, tripping over everything and still smiling like he'd won the race. We used to build pillow forts, turn off all the lights, and pretend the world outside didn't exist. In those moments, we weren't just siblings. We were each other's entire universe. I remembered the way he'd run to me after school, dragging his backpack, eager to tell me every little thing that happened. Like it mattered only if I knew. I used to braid his hair as a joke, and he'd let me, giggling. His cheeks flushed with joy, and later, when life grew heavier, I was the one he called first. When Dad got sick, when Mom fell apart, it was me he clung to like a raft. So how, I wondered, had I become the villain in his final chapter? Time doesn't steal memories. It just buries them. And maybe, somewhere along the way, we stopped digging. Maybe we let others place their own stories between us, their own fears, their own whispers. I moved away, yes, but never stopped loving him. I just needed to breathe, to find myself outside of the chaos our family had become. But I never imagined he'd see that as abandonment, that my silence could be mistaken for absence of love. There were birthdays I missed, phone calls I didn't return, letters I started but never sent. And with each unspoken word, a little more space grew between us. It wasn't intentional. It was survival. But now, staring at his lifeless form, I couldn't help but wonder if I had waited too long. If I had let the years pile up so high that neither of us could find a way back. And yet, in the ache of that moment, in the weight of what was lost, I felt something else too. The undeniable truth that love, even when fractured, leaves traces. Somewhere inside him, I had to believe a piece of that little brother still remembered. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic explosion, no screaming match, no door slammed in fury. Instead, the distance crept in like fog. Slow, silent, almost unnoticeable until you're surrounded by it. It started with whispers behind closed doors. A cousin making a snide remark about people who think they're better. An aunt conveniently forgetting to invite me to a family dinner. Small things, but they built a wall higher than I realized at the time. My brother stopped calling as often. Our conversations turned shallow, polite. He'd tell me how everyone else was doing, but not how he was. When I asked deeper questions, he'd brush them off or change the subject. And when I pushed too hard, he'd go quiet for weeks. I blamed the stress, the family tensions, the weight he carried. I never suspected that someone might be feeding him poison in tiny, consistent doses, until he began to look at me like I was the outsider. I know how our family works. Love is conditional. Affection comes with strings. And loyalty? It's often tied to silence, to pretending everything's fine even when it's tearing you apart. I was never good at pretending. I questioned things. I challenged the unspoken rules. And for that, I was branded difficult, selfish, disrespectful. I never left because I didn't care. I left because staying meant losing myself entirely. But apparently they told him another version. One where I walked away out of spite, not survival. What hurt most wasn't that they talked about me. It was that he believed them. That he let their voices drown out everything we had lived. I had always thought he knew my heart, even when I didn't have the words. But maybe that was just my own wishful thinking. Maybe he needed someone to blame for the fractures in the family, and I was the easiest target still. Some part of me held on to the idea that he knew better, that deep down, past the bitterness and noise, he remembered who I really was, that he knew I left not to hurt, but to heal, and that maybe, just maybe, he regretted letting them turn him against me. As the final hymn faded into silence, and the air thickened with unshed tears and unspoken tension, I lingered by the back exit of the church, unsure whether to stay or disappear. I wasn't expecting anyone to speak to me. No one had until then. That's when I felt a hand gently touch my elbow. I turned, startled, and saw Father Marcos. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were kind. He had been my brother's childhood friend, closer than cousins once, and something in his gaze made me pause. He didn't say much, just handed me a small folded envelope and whispered, "He wanted you to have this." His voice trembled, slightly, as if carrying the weight of something sacred. The paper was soft with age and warmth, like it had been held often. My fingers tingled as I took it, heart racing with questions I didn't dare voice. I looked around, afraid someone had seen, but the room had already shifted to small talk and logistical murmurs. No one noticed me anymore. I stepped outside, the cold air slapping my cheeks as I tucked the letter into my coat pocket. I didn't open it right away. My mind raced with possibilities. What could he have written? Was it one final blow? A justification for erasing me? Or something else? The weight of the envelope felt heavier than its size, like it held not just ink, but years of silence, regret, and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of truth. I walked slowly to my car, each step crunching over brittle leaves, my breath forming clouds in the winter dusk. I couldn't bring myself to read it in the parking lot, surrounded by people who had already buried me in their hearts. I needed space. I needed silence. I needed to be alone with whatever words my brother had left behind. So I sat behind the wheel, closed the door, and I let the stillness hold me like a long-forgotten lullaby. And there, with my fingers trembling and the engine off, I unfolded the letter, not knowing that what I was about to read would rewrite everything I thought I knew. The first line hit me like a whispered apology in the dark. "If you're reading this, I hope you haven't given up on me completely." I stared at the handwriting, his handwriting, and something inside me cracked open. It was shaky, uneven. Not the confident scribbles of his youth, but the fragile markings of a man running out of time. My breath hitched as I read on. Each word felt like a breadcrumb, leading me through the forest of our broken past. And the deeper I went, the heavier my heart became. He wrote about the family, how he felt trapped between loyalty and truth, how he had listened to the wrong voices out of fear. "They told me things," he said, "about you, about what you said, what you did, and I believed them, because it was easier than believing I had failed you." My eyes filled with tears. He admitted he hadn't reached out because he didn't know how to face the shame. He didn't know how to ask for forgiveness without reopening old wounds. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a day. I pressed the letter to my chest as if that could bring him back, even for a second. I thought about the years we lost, the conversations we never had. And yet, somehow, in that fragile sheet of paper, he had given me more honesty than I had expected to receive in a lifetime. He called me Mana, his old nickname for me. And in that word, I felt the warmth of childhood again. It wasn't just an apology. It was a reaching hand from beyond the grave, trying to close the distance between us. "Don't let them erase you," he wrote near the end. "You were never the one who walked away. I see that now. I'm sorry I didn't before." The ache in those lines was deeper than any wound spoken aloud. And though he hadn't changed the will, hadn't corrected the legal lie, this letter did something more powerful. It returned my place in his heart. Quietly, humbly, with all the weight of a truth too long buried. And as I folded it gently and placed it back in my coat, a strange calm washed over me, like standing in the middle of a storm and realizing, somehow, you'll survive it. But I wasn't done yet, because his words had given me back my voice. When I walked back into the reception hall, the atmosphere was thick with false sympathy and coffee gone cold. They were already talking about estate matters, pretending grief while circling around what they really wanted: control, closure, inheritance. I stood at the edge of the room, the letter burning in my coat like a living thing, and then, with a strength I didn't know I still had, I stepped forward. My voice didn't tremble when I said, "I have something to share." All heads turned, the room stilled, not from respect, but from confusion, maybe even dread. I pulled the letter out slowly, deliberately, and held it like a flag of memory. "You all think he erased me," I said, my voice low but steady. But he didn't. Not really. I watched their faces shift. Skepticism, discomfort, some trying to hide smirks. But I didn't flinch. I read the letter aloud, every word, even the ones that made my throat tighten and my knees threaten to buckle. The moment he called me Mana, I paused, and I saw my sister-in-law's eyes flicker. She remembered too. That name wasn't for anyone else, just me. The silence after I finished was louder than any insult I'd ever heard. No one said a word. No one offered an apology. But they couldn't unhear what I had just revealed. They couldn't pretend anymore that my brother had died believing their version of the truth, because he hadn't. In the end, when it mattered most, he chose to speak to me, not to them. And that meant everything. Not in a legal sense, maybe, but in the place where love lives, quiet and defiant. That letter was my inheritance. I looked at each of them, one by one, and said, "You tried to erase me from his memory, but love doesn't fit in a will, and truth doesn't need your permission to be heard." I didn't expect applause. I didn't want tears. I just wanted to take back my name from their silence. And that's exactly what I did. Not by force, not with anger, but with the truth written in his hand and the voice he gave me back. And when I walked away, slowly, deliberately, no one followed, no one dared. Because for the first time in years, they saw me not as the outsider, but as the sister who never stopped being his. I walked slowly through the parking lot, the winter air biting at my cheeks. But I barely felt the cold. My hands were still warm from holding the letter, and my heart, though bruised, beat with a strange steadiness. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying a question. That aching, constant question of, did I matter to him, had finally been answered, not by their approval, not by any inheritance, but by the trembling ink of a brother who had found his way back to me too late, but still in time. I sat in my car for a long while, watching the other guests trickle out, their conversations light, careless, already shifting to what comes next. They didn't look my way. Maybe they still thought they'd won something, kept something from me. But they didn't understand that what I got wasn't something that could be passed down or divided, What I carried now was invisible but immense. A quiet knowing. A peace not given by anyone, but reclaimed through truth. Through the courage of a man who had made his final words count. My eyes drifted up to the sky. Gray, endless, familiar. It looked the same as it had on the day we buried our father. Back then, my brother had held my hand the whole time, refusing to let go. That memory rose like mist from deep inside me, wrapping around my shoulders. We had known pain together. We had survived it once. And though we didn't survive each other entirely, this letter was proof that the bond hadn't died in silence. It had whispered until the very end. As I started the engine and pulled onto the road, I didn't look back. Not at the church, not at the people inside. They could keep the china sets and the family photos and whatever else they had clung to as proof of belonging. Let them hold on to what fades. I had something else now, something unshakable. I had my brother's words carved into the softest parts of me. And with every mile I drove, I felt lighter, fuller, whole again. Because when someone gives you their truth before goodbye, you don't leave empty. You carry them with you, in the places where no one else can reach. In the days that followed, I kept the letter close, sometimes tucked in the drawer by my bed, other times folded inside my coat, like a secret no one else could touch. I read it more times than I could count, not because I doubted its meaning, but because it became a balm to something raw inside me. Every time I saw his handwriting, shaky but sincere, I felt like he was still speaking to me, still trying to make things right in the only way he could. Redemption doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a hand on your shoulder when you least expect it. I started remembering things differently, not because they had changed, but because the pain no longer owned them. The laughter from our childhood no longer felt like a lie. It felt real again, valid again. I stopped questioning whether our bond had meant as much to him as it had to me. I knew it had. The anger that once built a wall between memory and meaning began to soften, and in its place grew something gentler, a kind of grace I didn't know I was capable of feeling. I didn't call anyone in the family, didn't need to. What needed to be said had already been said, and not by them. There was a strange relief in letting go of the need for their validation. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to acknowledge my pain. My brother had done that. And even in death, he had given me something the living never had. A place to set my sorrow down, and a reason to forgive without forgetting. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't a clean break. It's a slow unfolding. A decision you make over and over again, not just for them, but for yourself. To stop bleeding from the same old wounds. To stop rehearsing the pain like a play with no final act. His letter had started that process, not by fixing everything, but by showing me he saw me, that he had carried me in his heart, even when pride, fear, or others kept him from reaching out. And maybe that's what redemption really is. Not erasing what happened, but rewriting the silence with something softer, something truer, something that lets you breathe again without guilt. It took me a while to understand that the letter wasn't just an apology. It was a gift, not the kind you frame or lock away, but the kind that quietly changes how you walk through the world. I used to think inheritance was about things, about names on documents, houses, jewelry, bank accounts. But now I know better. What my brother left me couldn't be measured. He gave me back my place in his story. He gave me the words that the living had refused to say, and in doing so, he gave me myself. I stopped thinking about the will, the money, the pieces of our childhood home now split among people who never knew what that place truly meant. They could have the antiques, the dining set, even the photos on the walls. Because the truth? They never saw him the way I did. They didn't carry the same memories, the same laughter, the same scars. My inheritance wasn't written in assets. It was in the curve of his handwriting. The way he still called me Manna, the courage it took him to write those final lines. Some nights I sit by the window and read his letter again. Not because I'm stuck in the past, but because it reminds me of what forgiveness can do. How it doesn't just mend relationships, it mends the soul. I think of how many years I spent feeling erased, only to realize I was never truly gone, just waiting for the truth to find me. And when it did, it arrived not with fanfare or revenge, but with grace. And that grace lives with me now, quietly, faithfully. I talk to him sometimes, just in whispers. Nothing dramatic. I tell him about the snow, about the things I've been cooking, about the dreams that still linger. And sometimes, when the wind brushes the curtains or the house creaks just right, I let myself believe it's him, listening. Not gone, just elsewhere, just closer than I thought. That's the kind of love that outlives loss. That's the kind of bond that not even death can bury. So no, I didn't leave that funeral with nothing. I walked away with something they'll never understand. A letter, a name, a love that outlasted pride. That's my real inheritance, and I'll carry it for the rest of my life. Where are you watching from? Share your age and city in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There's more where this came from, and each one holds a piece of a heart like yours.